Hakamo. The Vice President for Administrative Affairs made a big mistake in his first public pronouncement on this subject of budget cutting and P&R, which was, he made what he thought was a lighthearted comment about the organization of it, and that was, let's roll out some process and do this thing. So our newsletter, our little chapter newsletter, which I was editing at the time, wrote a little editorial called Roll Baby Roll. And it talked about how such a leitmotif as rolling out a process suggests something that could very easily roll over the students and the faculty without much trouble whatsoever. And Ed, the VP who had said that, was very upset that we misconstrued his comment and so on. I think I saw something like these steps on your website. They're straight out of the book, whether you call it Path to Distinction or P&R or whatever you're calling it. They do what looks like a reasonable exercise of putting things in categories and then figuring out how to measure the things that you've got in those categories. They did the interesting thing to us of saying, well, we're not just looking at academic departments, we're looking at non-academic departments too, which they figured, okay, we're telling the category, the faculty, you're not the target of this. Everybody's the target, so let's all shoulder the burden and plow it together. But in fact, what it did was equalize academic and non-academic programs. It said, it's all the same stuff, so we can attack it the same way. And of course, where is the majority of the budget of a university? It's in the academic affairs, or whatever your division is called that handles academic. And so the other divisions ended up making very token recommendations for things that they would be willing to cut. And since their budgets are, some of them are discretionary and not visible as is visible the general salary budgets and so on of faculty, it was really hard to find out exactly what they were talking about when they were saying they were cutting this person, or they were not renewing this person, or they were not doing this program, etc. Student Affairs, for instance, runs a lot of its business off of student fees, as you know. And I just found out from talking to that vice president the other day that they have a huge pot of money from that, which they're planning to augment. You have a question? Just wave it around. Anyway, we can come back to any of these if you want to know what they were about, but the so-called quantitative and qualitative measures that they developed ended up being like a potential switcheroo for the departments. We had to fill out these long things. I was the department chair then. You have these big rubrics to fill out, a big grid or a rubric or something. They come in. So you're collecting all of this data on here. Some of it's qualitative. Some of it's stuff like, do you have an assessment plan? Some of it's stuff like, do you have high graduate school placements for your undergraduates who graduate? But a lot of it is rates and FTES and SFR and MFR. You know MFR? Major faculty ratio. Major to faculty ratio. And time to graduation, et cetera, et cetera. So they initially had a cutoff between big and small programs, which was 150 majors. And there are plenty of programs that don't have 150 majors. We had 3 majors in our department at the time: Geo, Anthro, and Social Sciences. Geo and Anthro had 60, 70 majors apiece. Social Sciences had 30 or so. So we were right up front on the chopping block. the thing is, those grids, when you turned them in, they were a two-edged sword. So you could be looking pretty good in your graduate school placement grade, but then they could say, well, but your MFR is this, or your FTES is this. So you could say, well, but we teach a lot of GE classes, don't you want us to do that? And they'd say, yeah, but we want you to have a lot of majors. So you can't really win. The grid will not make you safe. So I'm trying to analyze what the thinking was behind some of this, or what they told us it was. The first thing was that their idea is, well, it's simple. We just want an objective tool that we can use to measure the departmental and or programmatic performance, so we can make these important decisions. That, in fact, is what I like to think of as the holy grail of all administration at universities. They don't have the control or the authority or power to just hire and fire people and just open and close programs, not at public universities. They'd like to have that power. They want that control because they can shape them any way they want, and then they can go and tell the legislature or whoever they think their masters are that they need to be accountable to, the public. Well, see, we've taken care of that inefficiency and that wastefulness of a public institution. Of course, you cannot compare academic programs. They're incomparable. The ways to figure out if they're doing a good job or not are to go and talk to the students, talk to the faculty, see how people are interacting with each other, see if people are achieving the goals that they've set for themselves, find out what they need, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't mean you can never cut any programs. It just means that this method that they're calling objective isn't objective. It's selective. But it's justified when you have this atmosphere of budget emergency all the time, resulting in all kinds of confusion and panic and Naomi Klein's shock and awe, and they talk about the state is broke and we have to leverage our resources, and you spit up this fog of paranoid ideas about things, and people feel like, oh, I guess we have to do this. There are a lot of people on your campus who feel like, yeah, we have to do this. There were plenty. And they say things that sound reasonable, like our strategic plan should drive the budget allocation process. Oh, but the strategic plan says things like we should internationalize the curriculum. It's not a budget statement. So when they say that stuff, they mean something else. So their strategies to get to these goals with this justification that I can see are to make problematic things that were hitherto not problematic or not problematic for us, such as what the university is, what's good about it, what its purpose is, what roles people should have. So, I mean, there's been a lot of role change among the administration. They're all CFOs and CEOs and CIOs and stuff now. And they'd like to see more role change. They want department chairs to be much more like mid-level managers than like a colleague who is heading up some stuff, but who doesn't have a lot of power or authority. They love to talk about faculty in ways that are insulting, that are demeaning. All the criticisms of us as being afraid of change, of being Luddites, and of course I admire the Luddites because they were protecting their jobs. And I see nothing wrong with that. And it's not like the textile industry has gotten just so wonderful since their day. But they like to call us this stuff. I loved the one that was around during the early days of assessment, which was Sage on the Stage. You heard this?
Yes.
This, if you haven't, this refers to the lecturer who, according to this view of the world, imagines themselves to be a guru of a kind, and talks down to the students from the height of their great knowledge. I had some professors like that in college. Sure, there are a few people like that. But is that a good description of what we all do today? So they say stuff and they don't even know what they're talking about. And they say it to make our profession sound less professional and less like what we want our interaction with students to be. And the irony about this Sage on the Stage is now that they're all trying to get us to teach MOOCs. Who's teaching the MOOC? A sage on the stage, except he's on a screen or she's on a screen. And they've got 1,000 students, so that's going to be a lecturer. That's not going to be too interactive. It's not going to be too learned by doing. But because that model of pedagogy satisfies their other objectives, which is to find a pile of money somewhere, they've conveniently forgotten about Sage on the Stage as a way to demean us. So the whole apparatus of distinction and P&R and restructuring and so on is a drama in which there's a lot of activity going on. People are running around meeting, and people are throwing together calculi of different things, and there's phases of it: Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. There's different players. There's, I don't think, too much romance, but plenty of comedy. And it's gotten the faculty to fight with each other over scarce resources. And it's gotten them to feel like they're constantly insecure, and that in order to survive, we're going to have to try and get the right answer on these goddamn grids, huh? There's no right answer. You can't win with the grid. But the big deals here are, this is lousy research. If they're telling you, we're doing some research on this to find out the distinctiveness of Cal State East Bay, or to find out the future of your college or something like that. This is not how to do research. This is terrible research. They're not doing it with their avowed partner in shared governance. They didn't really do it with us very well either. They didn't include the faculty. They gave the faculty some marching orders and said, oh, well, you can be on the committees. And then, of course, there's the wicked problem, which the first people who used this are a couple of planners named Rittel and Weber, and I've got a slide with references of this that you'll see at the end. But they're talking about how there's different kinds of research problems. And in public policy, the research problems are very, very different from those of a biologist or a chemist or a French literature specialist, because your subjects are dynamic, for one thing, and they all have different goals, competing goals in some cases, and the ways to find out what sort of a policy you want to have are much more complicated than they are if you're studying a virus, which is obvious to most people. But their simple-minded format for doing this research ignores the human element, the difficulty of figuring out anything having to do with human affairs.